I would like to take this opportunity to introduce the moderator in our panel today. Steve Zinn is, you've all heard him on VPR, and if you hadn't, you should, and you should contribute. I've known Steve for, I'm going to say, about 35 years, pretty close. Steve was one of the, I think Steve was the very first on-air personality at WNCS, midnight one night. Was it you? Oh, it was Russ Kinsel, sorry. Second. He was the morning guy. And one of my Steve's a very, very creative guy. I hope he's not creative in his journalism, but he's a very creative personality. And I'm not going to get the year right, but probably in about 1980 or 82, during an election season in Vermont, there was a guy running for governor by the name of Harold Mebaby. Not really, but on WNCS, there was a guy running for governor named Harold Mebaby. And he had a great campaign song. Don't you want me, baby? Okay? Out of this man's brain. Steve's been a really important part of the fabric of Vermont for a long time. For those of us in Central Vermont particularly, delighted to have him at Vermont Public Radio, and delighted to have him with us today. Please welcome Steve Zinn.
I'm hoping that, thank you. Thank you, Tim. Harold Mebaby actually ran for anything. Anything you wanted to write him in for, he was happy to accept. This has been an eye-opener for me. It always is to hear a presentation like Tim's and to talk to educators about the challenges that face higher education institutions in Vermont. And I suspect for the panelists who come from the business community, it's also a bit of an eye-opener to hear what things look like from the educator's side of things. But this particular panel is an opportunity for you as educators to hear what things look like from the business side. And we hear a lot about especially in manufacturing, which I've done some reporting on, the difficulty manufacturers find in finding qualified people, and a perceived disconnect between what's happening on the education level and what the needs of manufacturers are. So it'll be interesting. We have a pretty broad cross-section of business people here today to hear their message about their efforts to find qualified people, what qualities they think are most important. And so we'll talk to them for a little while during this presentation and then open it up to questions or comments that you may have. I don't know, I assume the panelists are all here, and if they would come forward, I'd be greatly relieved. So I'll go right down the line with brief introductions, and then we'll have a few questions and answers, and again, get to your comments and questions too in just a little bit. Joining us on the panel to my immediate left is Erica Schramm. Erica is Director of Administrative Services at Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, where she's also served as Human Resources Manager. And if you don't know, the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation is a leader in the design and implementation of energy efficiency services for residents and businesses. If you look at their client list on the website, it looks practically endless. There are many utilities mentioned, many nonprofits, government institutions, and things of that sort. Erica, thank you for being here today. Also joining us is Michael Jagger, who's the founder and creative director of Jagger DePaulo Kemp Design. Michael, the JDK has offices in Burlington and Portland, from my understanding, and works with clients on product development and marketing, clients that include Burton, Microsoft, Patagonia, International Paper, the band Fish, just to name a few. And to quote from Michael's website, the company uses inspirational inputs, creative brainstorming, and rapid concepting exercises to develop new ideas that are both implementable and visionary. And immediately to Michael's left is Justin Wordley. Justin, thank you for being here. Justin is Vice President of Human Resources at Burton Snowboards. We probably don't need to spend much time introducing Burton. Started in 1977 by Jake Burton Carpenter, making snowboards and all sorts of other things, right, that cater to the snowboarding set. Justin has previously worked at Ben & Jerry's and at Rhino Foods. And next to Justin is Robert Patterson. Robert is Vice President of Human Resources and Rehabilitation Services at Central Vermont Medical Center in Berlin, which employs 1,500 part-time, full-time, and per diem employees. Robert also chairs the Human Resources Council, which includes all 4 of the Fletcher Allen Hospital-affiliated hospitals. Thank you, Robert, for being here. And finally with us at the end of the table is Lisa Gosselin. Lisa is Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Economic Development, has a background in journalism, Lisa, and also a background in business, having served on the management team at Eating Well Media Group in Burlington. Lisa, thanks for coming today. So I thought we'd start with that idea that I brought up at the outset, which was hearing from various employers that it is a challenge, or can be a challenge, to find employees who they feel have both the skill sets and the personal qualities that they're looking for. And as I said, this is a diverse group, so I wonder whether we could go down the line of the 4 of you nearest me, and you could explain whether it is a challenge, how challenging it is, and in what specific areas you have the most difficulty finding the kind of employee you're looking for. Erica?
First, thanks for allowing us to participate and to present to the panel today. I represent Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, and we are actually in a really fortunate position where we have a tremendous applicant pool for most of our positions. So for VEIC, really our biggest challenge is finding the right people to fill our positions. When I was preparing for the panel, I checked with a few members of my team to talk about what is it that we're looking for in our candidates. And actually, technical skills almost never came up. It really were those personal attributes around humility, commitment to personal learning, willingness to pitch in and do whatever it takes, and really a personal curiosity and intellectual curiosity that are those characteristics that set the average candidates apart from the candidates whom we hire and whom we find are most successful at VEIC. We do have a lot of technical positions, folks who go into businesses and residential areas to identify and recommend energy solutions. So in working with students who have backgrounds in engineering or technical trades are definitely areas where that pique our interest. But it's both those technical skills as well as those personal attributes that would make someone a successful candidate at VEIC.
Thanks, Erica. Michael Jager.
Hello. Great comments. One of the key things that leapt out at me, and one of the challenges that we look for is the dimension of curiosity is probably the thing that's most compelling that we're looking for. Certainly there's technical dimensions to what we need, but the thing we find that is a challenge is it's interesting how the weight of public companies, the pressure that is on a lot of young people and students and anybody looking for employment, but students in particular, the pressure is incredibly heavy, and it's tending to crush creativity as far as the curiosity dimension. So we're looking for people who have that just relentless curiosity. They're just hungry to learn. They're just relentlessly focused on that, because as the pressure increases around performance that's numeric only, it becomes a real challenge to find those people that can rise above that. So we're looking for that, people who are fueled by that. The other dimension is that we find challenging to find, and when you find it, you want to hang on to it, is people who are guided by the practice of empathy. One of the things that I think everyone here could help on is helping to increase students' awareness that empathy is a two-directional context. It's very interesting how a lot of young people, I think, have a very one-sided view. They don't have much empathy for the businesses that they're entering. They tend to have the perception about what they need versus what the business needs. And so we're looking for people who get that sort of intuitively, that it is empathy is a big part of the practice of being a good human being. So we're looking for those people, and they're challenging to find. So those are dimensions we're looking for. But there's a lot of incredible people out there.
Thank you, Michael. Justin?
Yeah, echo the thanks for being here. Good opportunity to speak with everybody. A few things I would talk about specifically here with Burton. One is we need people with passion. You know, Jake started Burton Snowboards a little bit on a whim. You know, he describes it as a get-rich-quick scheme that didn't work. And then when he focused on being passionate about the sport and the rider experience, it started to work. And we're trying to create the best snowboarding equipment in the world, so we need people who are passionate about that or passionate about the work they're doing, whether they're in IT or whether they're in HR or a product role, focused and passionate about bringing everything they possibly can in the door every day, because that's really the demanding environment that we're in. And Jake walks around and looks for the passion and really draws it out of people. It's still pretty cool that he's still there doing that. And the other thing, I guess, just build a little bit on the curiosity. I would put it in maybe a little different context. Actually, both the curiosity and empathy is the ability to learn. You know, we need people with skills and experience, but we really need people who can learn, because none of us are going to be doing the same things in a year or in 5 years. So we need people who can come in the door and dream up the new products that don't exist today, or dream up the new processes that don't exist today, deal with new and different people that they don't know, deal with changing conditions in the world that, you know, it's just cliche, but everything is changing so fast. So that's just so fundamental, and it's one of the things we're talking about a lot more in our human resource approach, is not just the traditional approach to how are people performing in their jobs, but what is their potential. And we talk a lot about potential is the ability to learn, being learning agile, really, really important for us.
Thanks, Justin. Robert?
Yes, thank you very much for having us. This is a great opportunity, so I appreciate the time that we have. I would echo a lot of similar comments to what the panelists have said. It's interesting across the different businesses and organizations that there's a lot of similarities. I think I kind of checked off the marks, and maybe I'll fill in a few things that I didn't hear. Critical thinking skills for the healthcare profession, I think, are enormously important. We're in a position right now in healthcare, as many of you know, we're going through a lot of reform efforts, and we're really redefining ourselves almost on a daily basis. And I think that, you know, having job candidates that are really resilient is huge. The ability to adapt to change is enormous at this point. And I would imagine that's in a lot of different industries where there was fairly recent downsizing and, you know, economic downturn rather. And I think the ability to collaborate is important as well. I think we find with a lot of new graduates that we get in, it's not necessarily a skill set that I believe is taught well. We need to collaborate in our business to provide the best quality care. We need to make sure our physicians, nurses, our DI folks, diagnostic imaging folks all talk the same language and can work jointly to have good outcomes. And communication skills, I think, are enormously important as well. I think that what we have found in our organization, and I don't know if the other panelists have found similar things, that there's a lot of generational differences in communication. And I feel like that is something that needs to be maybe addressed and talked about. I don't think there's strengths necessarily in one group, but just differences. And I think that's important to have that discussion, to have a workforce that is jointly moving in the same direction. And lastly, I think that behavioral characteristics are enormous to us, and I heard this with the panelists as well. I think there's a lot of skills we can teach. We can take someone into a job You have the base technical skills. Let's take a nursing student, for instance, who graduated and we're hiring brand new nurse. You know, they have the essential technical skills. They have to learn a lot more technical skills, obviously, on the job. But it's the behavioral skills are the ones that are really important. Those are going to innately make that individual successful in the organization. And I think that's, again, one of the more important things.
Robert, can you, just on the generational differences in communication, can you flesh that out a little bit through an example or just give us a clearer idea?
Sure. You know, and I think we've all seen this, and we see this on the floors of the hospital right now. You will see physicians, nurses, a variety of different even environmental service workers pulling out their cell phones and using that as a mode of communication. If anything, it's really efficient. But sometimes not every worker, say you're maybe a boomer, you don't quite get that's not the way to communicate. So unless you have some sort of understanding of when it's okay and when it's not okay, I think it can cause rifts in the workforce. So being able to kind of educate folks as are graduating to like the ability to understand, listen, communication is important. You know, it's important to understand what the expectations are at the workforce. And even in internships, I think it's important to kind of explain to folks that are participating in internships, it might not be okay to have your cell phone out and using it. This is one example. Okay.
Thank you, Robert.
Can I jump in on
Of
one
course,
thing?
and anyone should feel
I'll
free
have
to
some
jump in.
audience interaction. How many of you have college-age kids? How many of you have made phone calls or contacts on behalf of your college-age kids to try to get them a job or an internship? Good. It's my biggest pet peeve. I think that's one of the generational differences. You know, I'm really direct when parents email me or send me LinkedIn messages on behalf of their kids. Hey, my kid is looking for an internship. I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to them. And I think that's one of the things some of these kids are used to, and I've done it with my own kids. We drive them around to soccer games every weekend, and we make their schedule for them, and we schedule all their events, and they're used to just it being really easy. So life's not easy, it's hard, and they got to figure that out, and I'm glad to see that, and I hope that's really built into everything you're doing with kids in the academic setting too, is that level of engagement and responsibility in their own life. I think that's one of the things we have to be pretty vigilant about, pretty important.
Thanks. A warning to helicopter parents. Lisa Gosselin, as Commissioner of Economic Development, maybe you can give us the sort of big picture you've heard, and there's a real commonality in the comments made. Is that generally what you're hearing from employers?
It's interesting. I think those are great comments, and it's actually a wonderful opportunity, I think, to be able to tap these minds and the people who are really on the front lines. It's definitely what we're hearing from employers, and I think most employers are feeling, we have a really low unemployment rate right now in Vermont. We're almost at 3.2%. And so employers are actually having difficulty finding the people they need for the jobs that are open in many cases. And the challenge that they're finding is really they're looking for people who are motivated. And I must say, as the state is also one of the largest employers, and we've recently gone through a round of hiring. And that was the thing that we found ourselves really looking for the most, is who is really motivated, who really wants this job, and then what are some signs of excellence. It doesn't have to be anything related to the field, but some sign, if they've done a Tough Mudder race, if they've been the world's best basket weaver, whatever it is, let's try to take those skills and then build on them. But I think most of all, what people are looking for is the ability to train. I think as the Chancellor said earlier, more and more the training you're going to get is going to have to be on the job or throughout your career. So it's that ability to learn, as you mentioned, that I think is critical.
All those qualities that were mentioned, passion, curiosity, resilience, adaptability, empathy, the ability to collaborate and communicate, those are they're not intangibles. We know what you're talking about, but at the same time, they're not exactly chapter 1 in a textbook that's going to teach you those things. One of the things that the Chancellor mentioned when he was talking was the importance and concentration on internship programs now in many businesses that obviously give a student or someone who's entered the workplace a chance to learn, but also the employer a chance to sort of size someone up. And, you know, from employers I've talked to who have these programs, it's often the case that these interns turn into full-time employees. It works out. So I wonder whether that's something any of your businesses do or don't do for a reason. Erica, we can start with you.
Yeah, VEIC actually has a fairly robust internship program. This year we're hiring 15 interns, and we really focused on trying to hire Vermonters. I actually just asked a member of our team to find out if we have any interns who are coming from the Vermont State Colleges, and we don't. And it could be geography, but it could be in any number of factors. I did not find out whether we had Vermont College applicants. But VEIC does have a robust internship program, and really we try to give people quality work experiences where they can become a member of our community. And while we have hired interns onto full-time positions, our primary focus for the internship program is to, one, try to give people solid work experience, but even more importantly, to try to connect people to our mission. Our mission is to reduce the cost of energy environmentally and societally. And if we can try to instill that in the future of our society, then they can go on to do good, not only at VEIC, but in the world. So that really is a primary focus for our programs.
Thanks, Erica. Michael?
That's a large intern program. That's awesome. Well, we don't have quite as large, but we've had a constant intern program. It's really embedded in sort of the basis of what the creative world is about. But one of the things that's been an interesting trap in that, and I think the point that was made earlier about changes and what we can do, you also have the ability to change whatever you want. And I think one of the problems with internship is the word internship. There's so much baggage in the legacy of that. For a lot of people in a lot of places, certainly in the creative realm, you're running around doing go-for-nothing work that's a waste of your time and a waste of your summer or whatever it may be. Some are paid, some are not, some are abusive, and others are brilliant and life-changing. But the idea of internship, for a lot of people, there's a lot of baggage that it doesn't have the value that it deserves in a world that has turned into a place where if you're not capable of having collaborative skills and a really rich ability to communicate and participate and understand a mission that you're part of, it really becomes something that wastes everyone's time. So you can design them effectively. You have to get the expectations clear on both sides. You have to have accountability. They can be beautifully designed, and we've worked toward that, and we've had some success in it. But I can't count how many people that we've had come through that have had really horrendous intern experiences. Certainly our hope is, we see Vermont as a very progressive and very, creative and free-thinking place. One of the things I would suggest to the group is if we want Vermont to take a leadership role in that is even be open-minded about even changing the term internship. What if it was an in-learnship or a collaboratory, and you make it very clear to everyone this is a collaborative relationship, or it is an in-learnship. We're going to learn from you, and you're going to learn from us. But somehow start to actually transcend to another level about what the relationship's about, and change the conversation, because there's a lot of baggage in that term. So it's opportunity to make something new, but it's essential. I think it's an essential ingredient to, creating those future leaders and participants in your company.
Great ideas. Thank you. Justin, do you have parents calling you wondering about internships for their kids?
I'm very direct. That was good. Was waiting for you to come up with some new terms for us. That was good. Before I got to Burton, they actually, the HR department put a stop to all internships because they had turned into copy jobs and gophers that they were, and many were unpaid, which the Department of Labor, they don't like that. So we've resurrected them, and I think in the spirit of what we're talking about is a collaborative opportunity for young people to get experience. To me, that's the key word, is it's experience. We need people with experience. It's so crucial. But also get some stuff done. And we're probably a little more selfish than Erica is. That's a really good mission. And we certainly want people invested in the sport, which is what we're all about. But we're evaluating them. And that's one of the things we've been working on with our hiring managers, is how to design an internship so they get exposure not just to one job or one area, but multiple people. So we can actually evaluate if they're a talented person that we want to hire. Because if we can, this summer I think we're hiring 8. If we can, in intern roles, if we can then convert 4 of them into full-time jobs, to me that's a great win for us. It drastically reduces the cost of hiring, makes us much more efficient and people much more loyal. So that's just another dimension we're working on.
Thanks. Robert, of course, intern has a different meaning or can have a different meaning in your field.
Yeah, I think we might have Erica beat on number of interns. If you consider nursing students interns, which we see probably most of the folks here who are graduates coming through our doors. So, we certainly, myself, I was a student or intern, if you will. I think most of our clinicians went through and had that training, which is essential. I do see it as being a two-way street where we learn from our students constantly on what the most recent things are coming out as far as evidence-based treatment and care. So we are consistently and constantly taking students in, which I think would be considered interns. In some of our non-clinical areas, we've recently started considering internships. So that's something that it's good to hear the feedback because we haven't constructed the program and what it looks like, but I do think it's invaluable. I think that we find as far as at our organization that the jobs that are typically available and open with turnover is typically clinical jobs. But again, I think it's invaluable for us to learn from interns, and I think it's a way to certainly give folks in the colleges and students that are coming up valuable exposure to day-to-day operations. So a couple of the areas we're considering would be in our finance and accounting departments as well as our information technology departments. We have a fairly good size in both of those areas. So those are developing areas.
Are we talking about paid internships in all cases? Yeah, okay. And Lisa, again, for the sort of bigger picture, is this something the state works with employers to do? We heard the chancellor say earlier, an internship is great, but there's nothing worse than a bad internship program. Do you see kind of a broad range of internship programs out there?
I think ideally we would love to work with people like yourselves and come up with some best practices that could be shared across industry. I have heard over and over and over again that interns really are incredibly valuable to the businesses. I think the other end of it is that interns can also be incredibly valuable for the information they take back to the educational institutions, to all of you, and being that conduit of communication between what is it the businesses are looking for and what are the educational experiences that they are getting. And that's one role the state is trying to do a better job at. How can we better integrate businesses with education so that it's a win-win for the student and for the employer?
One of the things that struck me, Tim Donovan was talking about how policy can sometimes be years behind reality. What we might teach in schools can be disconnected from what's really happening because, to quote David Bowie, change can happen. Well, he just said change, but to misquote him, change can happen very quickly. Yet the qualities all of you sort of singled out as the most important qualities are kind of timeless, right? I mean, are you looking for anything different in employees today than you were looking for 10 or 20 years ago, I guess would be the question. And I don't know, whether you want to nod or shake your head or elaborate on that, but it did strike me in your listing what was most important to you, that these are things that, an employer 40 years ago would have valued as well.
So I think a quality that we're looking for, which is fairly recent to us, would be business characteristics in a clinician. The ability to have some background in day-to-day financials, the ability to have some perhaps lean techniques or Six Sigma techniques. Again, with healthcare reform efforts, we are constantly trying to cut out waste, look at inequality staffing, move forward, and really we're finding some of our most valuable employees have some training along those lines. And I think it would be very helpful if some of those techniques were described and introduced. There's a huge disconnect between our clinicians at times and actual business acumen, if you will. And I think that would be extremely helpful. And that's not something we were looking for 2 or 3 years ago, so it's fairly recent.
Michael?
I think additionally there was a comment earlier about a T-shaped person with sort of vertical specialty and broader understanding, and the topic of collaboration has come up a number of times. One of the things that we're looking for that's a little newer than in the past is you certainly would want people with a specialized strength, but with a reasonable understanding of the different disciplines you interact with. But the T-shaped person we're looking for has a little bit deeper ability to move across the disciplines with empathy and practice. But we're looking for italicized T-shaped people as well that are actually motivated to participate in the conversation. So we're looking for that, which I guess is kind of a timeless thing, but really people that are proactively looking to get into the conversation with other disciplines versus just a very surface understanding of those disciplines. And one other thought that in talking with our group in preparation for this was the idea of having internships actually give credit. I mean, create an incentive where if we can set up a construct that works and is consistent, and it's a measurable and a form that's really usable for people, it seems like if we could get it so there's an incentive for the students to actually want them, so you get a credit for it, and the schools are really supporting that, that would go a long way to change the whole orientation around internships. And some do, but it's not consistent. If we could hit that consistency, the incentive and motivation would shift dramatically, and we would definitely embrace that.
All right. Yeah, just because we've got about 20 minutes left, and I want to make sure there's enough time for questions and conversation. A show of hands for people who have questions or comments to offer at this point. Just so I can kind of manage things. All right. Well, we'll wait a few more minutes. I do, as this is a meeting with educators and a panel of business leaders. I mean, how often are there opportunities where that you have to talk to educators generally about, what your business needs? Erica?
I would say we have done that work in the past, specifically around designing curriculum to match our energy efficiency needs, and then specifically around the internship programs. But we are absolutely open and willing to have those conversations further. In addition to internships, the other thing that we look for in students who are coming out of college is community involvement. And so encouraging students to be very active in their community, not only through work experience, but by joining clubs and showing leadership through clubs. That's a great way to have students develop real grounded skills and get more grounded in what they would be doing outside of work. And so for VEIC, individuals who are involved in sustainability clubs or environmental clubs, or who demonstrate, who've created a challenge to make their dorm the greenest dorm out of all of the dorms. Those are real, tangible ways that students can develop skills, and I know that folks from our team are working with the state colleges to ensure that we're trying to create practices to instill an environmental ethic in students.
Justin, I read on your website that you don't have to know how to snowboard to work at Burton.
I didn't, but I do now.
Yeah, it was pointed out in the frequently asked questions in the employment section of your website.
It helps a lot.
All right.
One, just to jump on this question, I think CCV's done a good job with the career readiness program. I was involved a little bit early on and some just helping, because there was some really good outreach to business to help put that together. I actually lost track a little bit with where it's at. And not to throw a competitive comment out there, but Champlain College is outstanding at having dialogue with business. I have a degree from UVM and a degree from St. Mike's, and I talk with Champlain College people all the time because they're reaching out to us and asking us what our challenges are, what do we need, how can we partner and work together. So, they've been a great model in the Burlington area. And they're innovating too. I think that's they've got this new True Ed program around online learning that's pretty cool. And so I think learning from what a place like Champlain College is doing to help make sure they're really well connected. Because I think the times I've had to talk to educators, it's more been an educator inviting me to talk to a class not to a group of educators. So I think this is a great forum, and that's why I think we're all really happy to be here to at least share our own ideas.
Lisa, you have a comment to make? Well, make your comment and I'll ask my question.
I was just going to add that the state will be working with businesses and with labor and education on a workforce needs assessment. So we are trying to look forward and think about not only what are we talked a little bit about the character that we're looking for in our future employees, but also trying to look forward and think about what are the next sets of skills and how can we better assist all of you in training people in those skills. And I might add, too, that this is not just a Vermont challenge. I was at the National Governors Association Economic Policy Summit in the fall. Every single state in the nation is facing, a workforce and education dilemma. And it's not necessarily that our education is not up to snuff. It's that the needs in the workplace and the skill sets that you need to learn are constantly changing. And we're interested in people who can learn, not just because we want them to be able to ready to go on day one. It's because they're going to need to continue to learn over the next 10 years. And that's why all of what you do at the Vermont State Colleges is going to be increasingly important as we see 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds going back to take the classes that they need.
Yeah, as those needs change, and again, I hear this from manufacturers, that CNC technology that they now use at manufacturers, which requires math skills and, skills that you didn't necessarily need to have in manufacturing 20 or 30 years ago. So does the emphasis need to be on on-the-job training and internship programs, or does it need to be on the educational side so people go in prepared for those jobs?
I think it's both. It's one of the reasons why the Vermont Training Program, which is one of the programs in our department, supports everything from training through a lot of your institutions to on-the-job training where you might bring a specialist in who really knows this type of machinery and will then teach the workers how to use it, to leadership training.
So I do want to leave what time we have for your questions, and I believe there's someone with a microphone. Thank you.
One of the things that those of us in the classroom tend to focus on a lot is the ability to write, and I haven't heard anybody say that. Is it that it's such an obvious expectation on your part, or it actually isn't that important?
It's critical, says the writer.
Not just to text. Absolutely, that was on the list of empathy, collaboration, and writing. Absolutely, an essential ingredient for sure. I'm sure you see the same. Right?
Yeah, and I would connect it to critical thinking too. I mean, I think about Ned Grant, who was my 10th grade American Studies teacher at Mount Mansfield High School, and he taught me how to write, but the writing was the path to thinking about how to take a subject. So for me, I put those together. But I guess we don't ever do any formal assessments. It's a good thing for us to think about, actually, is whether we should ask for some writing samples.
Often a cover letter that comes with a resume gives you some insight into writing abilities. All right, thank you. Another question, comment? Ma'am?
Hi, thanks. So good segue. I'm wondering how you assess these applicants. So you have this new graduate or you have this potential intern, and that's quite an array of characteristics you're looking for. So do you have strategies that, it's mostly the interview, or is there an application form that you're taking a look at? Is there a continuum of approach there?
Sure. So our approach varies somewhat based upon the position, but for most of our positions where someone would be applying fresh out of school, we start with the resume and cover letter and identify whether the person meets the minimum qualifications based upon what they've written in their resume. And then we bring them, then we would have a phone interview with them where we would really identify what are those core criteria that we're looking for, both those technical job skills as well as some of the behavioral characteristics we've talked about. And we'll identify specific questions that we'll ask to assess. We then bring them in for an interview, and we further test those questions. So we have a pretty structured interview process where we intentionally identify what we're looking for in candidates and structure questions around those criteria, and that's how we would make our determination.
Similar process at the other businesses?
Yeah, we talked about behavior a little bit. So yes, we have to know that they have the qualifications, but then we want to know, what have they done? What have been their actions? My mantra I hammer with our team is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So what situations have they been in the past that are similar to what they're going to face in the job, and get them to talk about those situations in a lot of detail. What was going on? What did you do? What results did you accomplish? And really try to dig into it. So getting beyond are you a team player? Yes, I'm a team player dialogue, but tell me about a tough team situation where you failed. What happened? What was going on? What was your role? Who else was involved? So getting people to be able to really be clear about those situations, because those ultimately, yes, we need the qualifications, but we need people who can behave in the ways that are really important inside the business.
Robert?
So we follow, I think, a very similar process to make sure that the candidate's qualified. Obviously, you need to be a qualified nurse with a license in order to apply for a job, if you will. But we, as an organization, through some help with VTC, have been making an effort to train all our managers in how to interview and how to use behavioral questions, which I'm hearing in the panel. We are trying to push the idea of having tools for hiring and forming committees, because the research shows when you have a hiring committee and you're hiring into a job and your colleagues are helping with that process, the individual is going to be more successful, and there's going to be, again, a connection when they're hired. They already start with 1 foot forward, if you will. And so that's typically our process with the hiring. And then again, we really are moving more towards the behavioral characteristics, as long as the person has the technical basics.
Michael, I wonder, yours is a very different business. Is the process different?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the criteria is the same as far as the, just sort of the checks and balances to be sure that you're aligned on the basic level. But one dimension that we brought in that's different, that we started about 3 years ago, is we actually created a design test. We actually created a brief, because a lot of times you'll be looking at people's portfolio and work, and you can't really get your finger on exactly how long they took and what their role was in a collaborative piece. So we actually created a couple of different exercises that they have a level of rigor. You need to do a little bit of homework and research, and you need to be able to pull your thoughts together and then come back and present the directions or approaches you would use. And it's interesting, there's some times that students decline, and it's like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to put the time in, and that gives you a signal about whether you want them there or not. And others dive right in, and they come back, and it's a very impressive thing, because they need to present their ideas, they need to communicate that they digested the information. It's been really effective, and it was part of our relationship actually with Champlain that we developed that. And giving them feedback they deserve. The key is you have to put the investment in briefing and doing it well, and giving them the feedback to pay the respect that they put the work in. But it then starts things out on a very good path. But it was a different approach, and we only started it about 3 years ago.
Yeah, in the VPR News Department, there are many similarities with what you've described and with what you described, Michael. In that we ask someone to come up with to conceive of and pitch a story. To come up with a focus statement, and then to write a news story, and those kind of real-world exercises on deadline that give you a clearer sense of, the prospective employee. If you have more questions, that's great. But also, I'd be interested, because you've heard all the panelists at the outset describe the qualities they're looking for: the passion, the curiosity, collaborativeness, if that's a word, communication, empathy, all those things, and whether those things come up in the classroom setting or between you and students, and how you address them. So maybe that's food for thought if you want to make a comment on that. Otherwise, questions are welcome as well. So, ma'am?
So I had a question about the job advertising system. I've been in and out of employment for over a decade now, and what I see when I look at ads is they're not asking for somebody who knows statistics. They're asking for somebody who can run SysView 6.320, and you can't get past that checkpoint. And I love these words of collaboration and empathy. But when you actually look at ads for Dartmouth Hitchcock or something like that, what you see is can use Office Manager 8.5. And if you don't get that checkbox, you don't get your application moved forward. And that's the reality that people on the ground are seeing when they're applying for jobs.
So I would encourage people to apply anyway, even if you see those criteria. And I know at least at VEIC, we're guilty of that at times as well. And we're actually really trying every time we post a position to ask our hiring managers, is this really essential? Or is there a comparable skill that could meet the same need? And really trying to peel back what the minimum qualifications are. But if you're working with students, encourage them to apply anyway, because you never know what'll get someone's foot in the door.
I'll go in a different direction with the old school networking advice. So Burton posts a job for a marketing coordinator. We get 175 applicants. So the recruiter's job is to say no. They're trying to get down to a pool that we can work with. So they're going to take the best of those candidates. And I think, that's, maybe it's changing now with lower unemployment, but that's what a lot of us are dealing with, is a high volume of interested people. And if there's a requirement in the job, I think your point is a good one. We have to challenge hiring managers to make sure we really know what those requirements are. But if somebody's missing it and we've got 25 other people who have it, we're going to keep going with those 25 people. So, and that's where I guess I come back around to the old school networking piece, especially for college students, is to not rely on applying for a job or posting your resume online. It's very unlikely that's going to be the path to a job. I actually don't know what the current statistic is. A few years ago, it was, really grim about the percent of people who actually get a job that way, less than 20%. Most, it's through a connection. It's through a small experience that turns into a bigger experience. It's through, you've got to pass somebody who can put a resume in front of a hiring manager to encourage them at least to look at it. So the technology in the world hasn't changed that. In fact, I think it's made it even more important because we're more and more connected. So I think that's just such an essential skill. And we're experiencing it now. This is our intern hiring time, and the students who are talking to the professors, who are helping them make connections and who are working connections inside, those are the people who, not all of them are the ones getting hired, but they're certainly getting more time with us internally, so we're at least looking at their information more closely.
Great question, thanks. There's someone up here. Annie? Thank you.
Thank you.
I should have just given her this.
Could have just come up there. So I work at CCV and teach for CCV. Many of our students are first-generation college students. Many of them are older, so they're not living in the dorms. They're not taking on leadership opportunities on campus. They're managing families. They've been working in retail, minimum wage jobs for a long time. And I'm thinking about how they can be competitive in your pools. So are you open to things like informational interviews, where a student might feel really nervous to apply for an internship because they may not feel like they know what that environment is going to feel like, but a year before that internship, could they come in and do an informational interview just to get comfortable having those conversations with you all? And I'm thinking especially about our Vermonters, that there's some commitment, it sounds like, to hiring Vermonters, and we're working with students who are just starting their education, and I'm just curious to hear what you all think about some of those things.
Great, thank you.
So in our organization, we really support shadowing program, and I would recommend anyone who is thinking about a career, or maybe just really beginning, the education towards the career, or not quite exactly sure what they want to do, but they want some exposure, in pretty much any field, I would imagine, but certainly in the healthcare field, to reach out and to observe what it is day in and day out. It gives the student the opportunity to meet with probably most likely the hiring manager. We have a very large percentage of folks that started as students or started in our shadowing program that were actually hired. So we talk about some real face time. You get to meet someone, you get to hear what their interests are. Usually when they shadow, it's not a single episode. It's usually they'll come in for a couple, 3 weeks and kind of check out the job. Again, we want that to happen because we want to make sure that when people are hired into an occupation, that's an occupation that they really love. and they'll be skilled at it. So, and we all were in the same boat, if you will. So we're supportive of that. So I would recommend, and certainly, you know, it's open to all ages. It's not just younger kids, and we have many older adults who are taking advantage of that as well. Yeah.
Were you going to add something, Erica?
All I was going to add is that really there's no greater leadership experience than running a household. And so helping people be able to translate that experience and tell that story practically, and tell that story right up front in a cover letter very appropriately and practically would not be inappropriate at all.
Great, thanks. Another? Barb? Here's a microphone, Barb.
Do you have suggestions for ways in which we can better educate students to be curious, to be creative, to tackle new things?
You're the educators now.
How many of you know Sister Carita? Do you know the artist Sister Carita? One of the greatest teachers ever. She was, wow, you know, an inspiration machine. And she would change the context for her students constantly. She would make them observe at a level that others didn't. She literally did projects where she would put a Coke bottle in the front of her class, and you would need to do 200 drawings of it. Or she had Charles and Ray Eames come in and show a film, and the homework for the next day was to come up with, I think there was like 250 questions about the film. But she would also take students out into Los Angeles, and they would walk around and look through these little cut windows and sort of eliminate the noise and focus. But getting people into different contexts so that they remain curious, again, one of the biggest problems we have, I know in the creative industry, is you can Google anything and you think you're getting the knowledge of the world, and you can search through this little window with your head down. You need to look at things, smell things, touch things, talk to people, and get out there. And I think the teachers that get people out there doing and experiencing and feeling things, that's where you're going to find real insights, and you're going to create curious people. But it's the doing, and it's a physical thing. And then combined with that is presentation is another topic. Writing came up, but presentation seems like a very obvious one. But again, the nemesis is this. It's not just the communication problem of texting and things. It's people being able to present their ideas. And the deeper this hole becomes, it's not just about being successful with your ideas in your workplace. It's being successful with your ideas in your community and in your family. And I think as tough as it is, and it's going to be harder and harder for students to break away from that, I think part of being curious is being curious about how people respond to your ideas. Like if we can't keep people looking each other in the eye, and it is scary, and it should be, because it's exciting. But I think we need to breed inspiration in people so that, you know, it's really born of curiosity. And curiosity is a little scary, but it's what makes us happy. Dopamine.
Lisa?
I was at a conference recently where we were discussing startups and discussing what made one startup succeed and another startup maybe not succeed. And what has been shown over and over again is that successful startups were predicated by a number of failures. And I look at our education system. I actually went through the French education system where if you got a 10 out of 20, you were ecstatic. We are really, I think, training people to only be successful. We're not teaching people how to fail. And I think if there's one message that I would love to share with all of you is, particularly if we're looking at discouraged workers or people who've tried something once and it hasn't worked, how do we help them get over that hurdle? How do we teach people to embrace failure, to learn from it, to take that as not something bad, but as an educational experience that you can build on and move forward?
I interviewed a UVM grad yesterday. He's a business major, art history minor, and he sat and told me this great story about the reasons why he was an art history minor: to be different, to be able to think differently, to be able to have better conversations with people about interesting things. I just thought it was fantastic, and I don't know who encouraged him, or if anybody, or if he came up with that on his own, but encourage people to be different and unique, and don't be just an engineer or just a business student. About, you know, how can you in your educational path, find things that bring out the best in you and will bring out the best in you for the rest of your life, you know, so it's not just the tried and true traditional routes.
I think we have time for one more question if there is one.
Given the reality of mobility and jobs, would any of you like to share some fresh ideas about turnover?
You can never step into the same river twice. I don't know, I think just the reality is that portrait of success has changed. And that's just a reality. I think the sooner that everybody embraces that and an eclectic path and a journey that is shifting and changing, you know, couch it in resilience or whatever we want it to be, that ability to adapt and change and be open-minded and shift and rethink your career and your path, that is a portrait of success for a lot of people and is the antithesis of what existed even 10 years ago. And I think we all need to embrace that and think about the excitement of that and help perpetuate it versus trying to bridle against it. Is at least how we've looked at it.
So I think in regards to turnover, it's certainly something in our organization that that's difficult. If we have it, for instance, we hire a nurse on and he or she decides to leave, we are looking at something around the range of $30,000 to recruit and replace that person. So it becomes a very expensive thing, and as you can imagine, if you heard me talking about healthcare reform and trying to cut down on waste, that's something we want to eliminate as much as possible, is turnover. With that said, I think organizations really need to make a commitment to growing their workers and allowing them to move into new and more exciting things. Our organization really values education. We offer tuition assistance towards degrees, and we have lots of people who take advantage of that. We're toying around with the idea of paying for advanced certifications right now to again, you know, that would help hopefully improve outcomes. Given where we're headed, that makes sense. I think it's going to be a challenge for us, you know, to be able to grow our workers and allow them to really move in new and different novel directions. And as a larger employer, I think that's possible for us. So I think it's a challenge.
I think it's also important for employers to set their expectations appropriately. We had a number of individuals that recently give their notice at VEIC. They were all about 25 to 27 years old. They all started at VEIC when they were about 22 years old. And I had a hiring manager say, "That's a really bad thing." And I quickly challenged them. I said, each of these individuals are leaving for good reason. They're not leaving because of something VEIC did. They're leaving because they're 25 years old, they've been at an organization for 2 or 3 years, and they want to do something more. And that's normal. You know, if you look at generational differences, how many of us took our first job for more than 2 years? 18 months. Second job, 18 months. Third job, 5 years. And so on from there. And so really what I'm trying to help our organization do is have a mind shift and a cultural shift around looking at turnover. And turnover is not bad, especially if you are investing in hiring young individuals or people who are new to the workforce. Expecting people not to stay for a long time is actually, for us, going to become more of the norm.
Okay, well, thank you for your questions, and thank you, panel, for your great comments. It's really been wonderful.